gonna go ahead and start recording.
All right. I am recording. You turn the volume up.
Yeah, just did.
All right. Welcome to the Upper Room Discourse. I'm Felipe Marin.
And I'm Dakota Childress. Stay tuned for our discussions on scripture, doctrine, music, and anything else.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of the Upper Room Discourse.
Yeah, it's well, either last week or this week. It was the 1 year anniversary of the podcast.
Yeah, last week was the 1 year anniversary, but we forgot.
Yeah, more like it just never came up in our minds. Great sound effect.
Yeah, just to celebrate our 1 year anniversary. I love that sound effect.
I was gonna say happy 1 year, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just came and went. Season 3.
Yeah. I mean, I guess time flies really quickly. I was trying to think of like something we could do or say, but I guess just we can look back and all the episodes we've done.
It's been a year.
Yeah.
Move forward. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Go for it.
All right. Well, I guess we can, apologies. We'll jump into today's episode then, I guess. If you guys want to celebrate also, you can celebrate our 1 year anniversary. I guess that's all we got to say on it.
I don't have anything to say.
So to kind of continue from last week, so obviously, you know, if you guys remember, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, you should go back, listen to it. It was a good episode. But today we kind of are continuing the conversation about lyrics. You know, and again, we talked about words, and words are very important. And what I want to look at now, which is, this is going to kind of encompass this week and also next week, but it's going to look at, this song really isn't controversial in and of itself. Next week's song is a little bit more controversial, but really these controversies revolve around lyrics or like specific lines within a song, which is what we're going to look at today, which I think the episode title will probably give it away, but we're going to be looking at How He Loves, written by John Mark McMillan. Popularized by the David Crowder Band.
Yeah. I mean, this song, yes, popularized by David Crowder. I was actually reading about it earlier because the only one I'd only ever heard the David Crowder version. Mm-hmm. I've heard John Mark McMillan version, but not the original.
Yeah.
But I've heard the David Crowder version and then the version with Kim Walker-Smith, so the live one. Mm-hmm. But if you actually go to the original version, the song is totally different, completely. There's a whole extra verse in there, and I don't know if you've read about why the song was written. Have you, Felipe?
A little bit, but I didn't do a lot of research specifically on it.
Right, so the song was written because there was this guy named Stephen. I think he was a youth pastor at a church and friends with John Mark McMillan, and he said something to the effect of he wanted to be useful in the lives of the youth, basically to kind of create a revival among youth or something to that effect. And that night, him and like two other people ended up being in a car crash and they all died. And then John Mark McMillan, I think he was recording something when he heard the news. And then the next day, he ended up writing How He Loves. Mm-hmm. And so if you go and listen to the original one, there at the end of the song, there is a tribute to Stephen, was the guy's name, at the end of the original one. And so the whole song is originally attributed to, I guess, the memory of this Stephen guy. Mm-hmm. I can't remember his last name, but you can go look it up on Wikipedia. And so, because like I said, I was sitting there listening to it, and then I thought the song was over.
Oh, and then you heard
and then it kept playing. I'm like, okay, this is kind of weird. And he started talking about Stephen, and I was like, oh, okay, so this must be somebody I knew. So I went and looked it up and saw that and was like, okay, this kind of takes on a whole different meaning about the song.
Yeah, I knew as much about that. It was a car crash with one of his friends. That's as much as I knew. I didn't really research it.
Yeah, that's about all I saw. I don't think not too many more details there, but that's why the song was written. So I guess when you listen to this song, I guess keep that in mind because what we hear on the radio, I don't even know if I don't think it plays on the radio anymore.
I don't think so.
But the version you'll hear with the one with Kim Walker Smith, so the live version that John Mark McMillan did, and then the David Crowder version, they eliminate the last, I guess, like minute, which is that last verse. So kind of, I don't know. It's melancholic, I guess. Very sad, but it brings up the question of, why not keep it in there? But like I said, it was a tribute to one of his friends, so.
Yeah, and I think that's where, which we'll talk about what the lyric change was, but the reason why the lyric changed was because David Crowder Band actually approached John Mark McMillan, and they wanted to use it as a worship song. So I'm thinking that's partly why, like that final pit was removed, was because they wanted to turn it into a worship song. Because originally it wasn't really a worship song. It was really just like in memory.
Yeah, that's what I would classify it as an in memoriam, I guess, instead of like actual worship song.
Yeah.
More like a prayer or something.
Yeah. And so that's where I say like it's kind of controversial, but not really because like behind the scenes, David Crowder actually met with John Mark McMillan and discussed everything. And that's when they changed the lyric. It wasn't like that they were like, we're just going to change the song when we do a cover of it, and that happens a lot with artists, we may not see it on the front end, but in the background, a lot of times they'll like, talk to each other. They're not like competing, I guess, if that makes sense.
Right. Which I don't think it's, nothing to compete about when it comes to playing a song anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
You see how many versions of a song get played, whether it's Christian or secular. So I've listened to plenty of songs by artists over the years who I always thought they wrote the song and then come to find out it's somebody else. So honestly, when I found out that John Mark McMillan was the one who wrote How He Loves, I was like, didn't know that.
Yeah, I was the same way.
Pretty surprised.
That's something that I guess people that don't know the music industry, that happens all the time. It happens very often that artists will write a song and they won't be the ones to sing it, or they'll have somebody else sing it. Yeah. And well, I guess that's an interesting segue. By the way, my notes are on a napkin. We're going like old school.
That's crazy.
Like, wasn't this like how Pixar was pitched or something on a napkin?
I have no idea.
I don't know. But I got my notes on a napkin here. But that reminded me, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about, to kind of add, because this is going to be a short episode if you guys couldn't tell, where the song there's not a lot to talk about, and our book for today is Philemon, which is like one of the shortest books of the Bible.
This will probably be the shortest episode we've ever had.
It's possible, yes. So I wanted to pad it in. But speaking about artists that write songs for other people, I've actually been recently listening to Matthew West's new album. And Matthew West, I would say he's very well known, but he's actually written a lot of songs for a lot of well-known different artists. I'm trying to think of which ones come to mind. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. But there's a lot of big name artists that Matthew West has actually written songs for them.
Really?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't know any because I don't really pay attention to that mostly. But
most of them are country artists. I'm trying to think of what's the dude's name.
I don't know.
My brain is like not working.
What song does he sing?
It's Miley Cyrus's dad. What's his name?
Billy Ray Cyrus?
Thank you, Billy Ray Cyrus.
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't think of any. All I could think of was Cyrus, and I was like, what's his name? Matthew West has actually written a lot of songs for him.
Really?
Yeah. So Matthew West has been in the industry for a while.
Yeah, 20 plus years.
Yes.
So
I don't think he actually like started putting out his own music till like the 2000s, but he was doing a lot of stuff back in the 90s and all that.
Yeah, it's not surprising though. Honestly, looking at Matthew West, that's not surprising that he writes songs for other people anyway. I think there was somebody recently he helped write some music for and was also on the album.
Ann Wilson.
Yeah, Ann Wilson.
She's actually a part of his record label.
Yeah, they just did a song together, new song actually. And I think
It's actually on this album, on Matthew West's new album.
yeah, I heard it. I heard one of the songs on Tuesday.
It's called Last Page of the Bible. I actually really, really like that song.
I think so.
Yeah.
Because they were talking. I think he's on right now. I don't know. We're plugging Matthew West pretty hard, but we're supposed to be talking about John Mark McMillan and David Crowder. But I heard it on K-Love because he's on the K-Love takeover right now. So, but,
yeah. But I really like it. I think my favorite song off the album is probably Unashamed, which basically the chorus comes from the same, like, I think it's what Romans 1:18, for I am not ashamed of the gospel. But just the way he paints the story, and I really, really like it a lot. You know, basically, because he starts the first verse and he talks about, like, the Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, you know, 3 guys thrown into the fire. He talks about Daniel being thrown into the lion's den for what he believed. And then he's like, what am I going to be known for? Will I stand for my faith? And it goes into the chorus, I am not ashamed.
Right.
You know, that's probably my favorite song off that album.
But, and not to keep going down the Matthew West, because we need to get back over to John Mark and how he loves. But yeah, like we said earlier, nothing against Matthew West, but that's not our focus for this week. So going back to, like I said, how he loves, not much of a controversial song, but the one lyric or the one line that we've been looking at, or that we're paying closer attention to, is actually further into the song. And it's the line that most people never heard of, because David Crowder says unforeseen kiss.
And it was really popularized.
And it was popular. I think everybody knows that version. I don't think a lot of people know the John Mark version, and which says sloppy wet kiss.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I don't really care either way. You can sing whatever version you want to sing, in my honest opinion. I don't think it's going to hurt one way or another, and go for it. If somebody takes offense to sloppy wet kiss, I guess that's on them. I don't know.
No, I mean, that's true.
Care. That's
I mean, I think if you take offense to it, it's definitely on you. But the reason they changed it was because David Crowder was like, I don't know if people are ready for something that raw in a worship song.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that.
That's the main reason given for the change.
Right, and I can see that, and it's kind of, him saying that is kind of so opposite of the song we talked about last week. You bringing up...
Oh, I know.
I was about to say worship song, but a Christian song, I guess is the best way to put it. Like a prayer is raw to the point where it's questionable in its integrity and message, just because of some of the words used. So go back, look at that episode. We kind of, I wouldn't say break it down about the song, but basically the problem with the song, A Prayer by King's Kaleidoscope. But I just don't think rawness should be the worry about any song at all. I think that's the wrong thing to look at when it comes to any type of Christian song, because Christian music should be raw.
It's true.
It should be full blown. It should be all out there, not in a sense of we're getting unbiblical, but just look at, and we did a whole series on it last season, but just go back, read through Psalms, and just see the rawness there, just see the explicitness there. Even in David's prayers and Asaph's prayers, songs. So, I mean, just look at those and look at the word usages in the Psalms, and not even there, but even in like Isaiah, Jeremiah, in the Book of Lamentations. So you got multiple books where a prayer or a song or a hymn or something along those lines is very explicit and is very raw, and it can be emotional. And I think all of those things should be in Christian music to some extent.
No, I mean, absolutely. I would agree, wholeheartedly. So I don't know how I wanted to do this. I was like, what if we did like a court trial, like the case for which version of the song that we should sing? I think I am kind of with you. I don't really care personally. I will admit, I don't think Unforeseen Kiss is a good alternative, because I feel like unforeseen kind of takes away from the song and you kind of lose a little bit of the meaning. If we look at that, which the song is written kind of weird, but it is a verse. It kind of feels like a bridge, but it is actually written as the verse. There's 2 verses in this song. This is the second verse. I don't know what that was. It is spooky season.
Yeah, really.
So I guess the ghost came out. I'm sure you guys probably heard that on the mics.
But yeah, going back to, gosh, I lost my train of thought after that.
Yeah.
But which version is basically what you were saying?
Yeah, kind of like seeing. So if we think about it, obviously this is a very emotional song. It's a very raw song. You could argue that it is a Jesus is my boyfriend song if you're using it in a worship setting.
I don't think so.
It's all about how he loves us. While it is biblical and true, it still has that kind of emotional vibe to it. I'm not saying it's a wrong or bad thing, but you could argue for that.
At this point, every song to you is going to be a Jesus is my boyfriend song.
Not every song, but I think this one is, people argue for it, and I get it, because it's, like I said, the song is literally about how much he loves us. But in context, it works.
I mean, it's not that. It's about, if you take why the song was written, and if you take the meaning behind the song, it's not that he just loves us, but it's that when we're facing trials and storms, we often tend to forget that God is there in the midst of them. Sometimes God creates the trials and the storms. And so we don't get into this idea of that because we're going through something hard and a difficult time, that God doesn't love us anymore and that he's punishing us. So I don't know what John Mark McMillan is trying to get at with the actual theme. I can't get into his head, right? I'm not John Mark. And so we kind of have to go with what is actually being said in the lyrics and just understand that, okay, John Mark just lost a friend. And so anybody who's lost somebody close to him is going to understand a feeling of losing somebody, and that being a trial, that being a storm, that being hard, and the feeling like, okay, where is the love here? Where is the grace of God? Where is the mercy of God? And those aspects, and we have to go back to the Bible. We have to go back to Scripture and understand that even in the midst of those things, God is still there with his love. And even though he creates these hard times, that he's going to bring you through it. And I think that's the whole jealous portion of it, is that he wants your attention and affection, not only in the storm, but outside of it as well. So I don't think it's one of those Jesus is my boyfriend songs whatsoever.
But the thing
I'd have to hard disagree.
Well, the thing is you only know that when you know the context. Have you ever been in a worship set where they explain the context of the song before they sing it?
Well, then explain the context.
Well, you just explained the context of his friend dying. I've never had that explained to me when the song is used in a worship set. Right. The focus of it when it's used in worship is specifically focusing on that aspect of God's love for us. So that's where I argue is the Jesus is my boyfriend, not in the original song, because John Mark McMillan didn't intend for it to be a worship song, but in the way it's been used and the way it was popularized.
Yeah, but I don't think you have to be explained when the lyrics are set there. And when you see the evidence in the lyrics of it being a trial and a storm and being the hard times, I don't think you have to get any meaning out of that and have a background story about it at all.
I guess, but a lot of that meaning comes outside of the song, because you're adding that extra meaning outside of it.
I mean, as far as the backstory goes, but like I said, I wouldn't say this is a Jesus and my boyfriend song. That's just me though.
Yeah, I mean, you can, if that's what you want to decide, but I know a lot of people, when they talk about Jesus and my boyfriend, this is one of the first songs they bring up, because it literally is like, he loves me, he loves me, he loves me, which again, that's not wrong. It's biblical, it's true. But when it's in such an emotional song, it can be used in a very negative way, which I think this song, definitely here at Oakview, in my experience, I've seen it used that way. So,
I mean, I don't know, agree to disagree, I guess. But anyway.
Yeah. So obviously the lyric was changed. If you look at that verse, that verse very strongly is talking about kind of this idea of intimacy is really the big thing. And what I really think about is, I know the word's in there, but redemption. And that's really what the verse is about. It talks about how, we're drawn to him. We are his portion. He is our prize. Drawn to redemption by the grace in his eyes. If his grace is an ocean, then we're all sinking. And that's where we get to heaven meets earth. And then we have that intimacy, and there's the line. Like an unforeseen kiss, or like a sloppy wet kiss. And I think when it comes to the rawness and the intimacy, sloppy wet kiss makes a lot of sense. I understand if you don't want to use it in worship. I kind of get that. But I think in context with the verse and the meaning, it makes sense. Unforeseen kiss kind of takes that away from me. Because I'm like, was it unforeseen? First off, an unforeseen kiss for me sounds creepy. That you're just like, chilling, going about, and then all of a sudden this kiss comes out of nowhere and you're not expecting it. You know, that's, for me, that's what I picture. You know, so I understand if we want to change it from sloppy wet. I get that. I'm not saying that it should be sloppy wet kiss, but I don't know if unforeseen kiss is the best usage or like the best change, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I'll just take the other side. Well, when I hear a sloppy wet kiss, okay, all I think about is the first thought that really comes to my mind, okay, is a man and a woman who've been married for quite a while, and they just have no care,
Okay.
right? And they're just going to kiss however they want because they can do that. They can be as goofy or whatever as they want, okay? And so that's kind of where that comes from. They're more intimate in that. The unforeseen kiss, you know, for me, it's more like a young couple. They're kind of just sitting there, maybe chilling or whatever. I don't know. And then one of them kisses the other just out of nowhere. I guess that's kind of what I see in the unforeseen and in the sloppy wet kiss. So I mean, you can have something different whether you're a listener or Felipe, but that's kind of where my mind goes. Maybe some people do see the unforeseen as creepy. I mean, I can see that. I don't think that's the first thing that comes to my mind necessarily. But I mean, I guess at one point it did. I was like, man, it kind of does sound a bit creepy. But I guess, you know, looking at it, is it really creepy if we're talking about how the relationship between the church and Christ is supposed to be? It's supposed to be romantic. It's supposed to be this coming together in unity and holiness. You know, we're the bride, Christ is the groom. And so there is this infatuation with one another that's just supposed to be there. And so I don't know if really a kiss is the best way to show that. I mean, I'm not saying a hug is, because a hug is hug is like, okay, we're just friends or whatever. But
Yeah. See, and I think that's interesting is, I mean, obviously when we think of a kiss, you know, we think romantically, you know, we think of a couple. But I feel like in this song, it feels kind of weird to think about it that way, almost. Like, I get it if we think of the context, obviously the church is the bride of Christ. You know, there is that coming together. But for me, when I think of the kiss, I think of it more of like this joining, if that makes sense. You know, like, I'm not really thinking, which is me, I don't really think of like, in the sense of like a romantic couple kind of idea, but I'm thinking of this like coming together, this union, heaven and earth coming together. And we see that in the relationship between us and God, obviously. But I mean, I don't know. It's interesting.
But there still has to be the couple there.
I guess, yeah.
I mean, because if there's romance there, there's the couple there. So it's got to be intertwined.
I guess, yeah.
So you can't eliminate the coming of the groom and the bride together and not have romance and not have the unity and then have everything that comes with it.
I know, but when I hear
in the relationship,
when I hear sloppy wet kiss, I think of a dog coming up here and giving you a big old sloppy wet kiss. That's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Those are just licks.
No, I mean
people call them kisses, but
if you like let the dog lick your lips, it's a kiss.
That's gross.
I'm not saying it's not gross, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind when I think sloppy wet kiss.
I don't think I'd want to equate anything to a dog coming up and licking me in the face like that. But
I don't know. For me, it's just
that. I mean, if you go that far, that's just gross.
Yeah, but it's the intimacy. That's the vibe I get, is intimacy.
I don't think anybody wants to be intimate with their dog.
You would be surprised.
That's bestiality.
I'm
just
saying.
That's a different
I'm just saying you would be
there.
surprised.
Yeah, you're probably right. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, anyway, like, I don't think it matters personally. Like, you can sing whatever you want to sing. For me, unforeseen feels kind of weird, and sloppy wet is also kind of weird. Maybe they should have changed it to something else.
Yeah, I think that's the bottom line. Is even if you take away the whole meaning of a kiss, okay, just look at the song in itself. You just wrote a song about, or that's commemorating one of your, I guess, best friends. And you're talking about the love of God, the grace of God, and how he's so jealous for us. and then you go into talking about a sloppy wet kiss.
Yeah.
And that's really where for me the tension lies, especially after listening to it today. I'm just like, why even put
I
that in
agree.
there to begin with?
I agree. And I feel the same way. And it's funny, I was just thinking about it. You know what this song reminds me of? The parable of the prodigal son. And when the son and the father reunite, and I think I believe the father kisses the son. I mean, it's not like a romantic, like a kiss on the lips.
Yeah.
I would say it's probably not that, but like a greeting, welcome. But I think that's the imagery I get in my head of us being joined with the Father, of this coming together, and of that kiss being right there.
Right. And I think that,
I guess that would be an unforeseen kiss, because I guess the son didn't see the kiss coming. Maybe he did.
I don't think you can see a kiss coming unless you're just planning. I don't know. But anyway, I do agree with that. With the prodigal son, and I think that's a good illustration of how we all are. Mm-hmm. And everybody, I say everybody, I don't know how many people actually just they're like, oh yeah, man, prodigal son. But we all find ourselves in the prodigal son, and you're exactly right. That is how God greets us, and He welcomes us back, open arms. His love is jealous, and while He does pursue us, sometimes His pursuing us looks like patience and waiting for us to come back and allowing us to do the things we do, and then coming back to Him and realizing, yeah, we were wrong. And so there is that intimacy in knowing that you did wrong and coming back to God, seeking forgiveness, and then His love washing over you. And so I think even in the midst of, whatever time you're going through, and it's a great kind of, not contrast, but comparison to the song, in that God still loves us at all points and all times, and our own hurt and brokenness and difficult seasons, whatever it may be.
Absolutely. And then I've got two last things. Like I said, today's going to be a short episode, but I got two last things with the song, which, I mean, I guess they kind of go with the song, but they kind of don't go with the song, if that makes sense. I don't know what that sound just was. Did you just drop a pen or something?
No, I didn't drop. Man, there's been a lot of noises going on.
It's spooky season.
Yeah,
We've entered into
Halloween.
October. Yeah.
And look, things are creaking, cracking, noises going off in random places.
We shouldn't have turned the lights off.
Yeah, I know. We just got the one bright light.
Yeah.
Jesus.
But what I wanted to talk about is, first off, I want to talk about lyrics on a screen, because this is a song where I think lyrics on a screen matter and how they're placed. Because when I was young and I first heard this song, I didn't know what this song meant. All I understood was the chorus. I was like, what do you mean, I am a tree? Like, what does that line even mean? And a lot of that, I think, is attributed to the way the lyrics were put on the screen.
Yeah. One of the very first, I think I was like 17, 18. I just was like, felt the call to ministry. And about a month later, the youth pastor at the time, he was like, hey, why don't you do a message on a Wednesday night? And I was like, okay, don't really know what I'm going to do. I'd been thinking about it. And then one of my mom's friends, she had just been reading, I think, I want to say it was either in Psalm or Proverbs. So take your gander there. But anyway, and it was about a palm tree. I can't remember the verse and where it's located. So, but I did a message on what a palm tree is like. And so if you actually look at a palm tree and you look at its bark, so it looks like it can poke you at any second. It kind of sticks out everywhere. But when rain and wind start coming, and people who are down in Florida, people at the beach right now, people who live in places where hurricanes are going on, just a quick plug, pray for them.
Yeah.
Second hurricane hitting Florida right now. And it's supposed to be just as bad, if not worse, than the first one. So yeah, a lot of struggle going on there. But going back to the palm tree. So palm trees actually close up and they make themselves smooth. The bark actually closes up. And So that's the image I've always had ever since doing the message on that verse is, and when the winds come, it just sways with the wind, and they have pretty strong roots. So they're not going to be easily pushed over. They're not going to be easily ripped out. And also that's partly due to the bark and the leaves. And anyway, so that was like the first message I guess I ever did. And every time like I've heard this song, that's the image that's always popped up in my mind, is the image of a palm tree closing up and protecting itself and having some way of not fighting against the wind, but it blows with the wind, but it's not shaken and it's not pulled out. And so that's always kind of been the imagery I've had. So just go do some research on palm trees. They're actually pretty cool, and just see how they, react to storms.
Yeah. And
pretty interesting stuff.
Nowadays, that's similar to the picture that I have in my mind, is this idea of the hurricane and the palm tree was standing. But I think when I first, because I think the way the lyrics were originally put on the screen, I Am a Tree was just by itself on the screen. And the reason why it's confusing is because the entire verse is one long, almost like a sentence. And the way it's sung is very broken up. And I think this is where we need to keep in mind, because I know this, because I do a lot of lyric stuff with like setting up lyrics and doing things like that when I get a chance. But the way you present them on the screen matter, because they help you with the meaning, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I am a tree goes with the next words. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of his wind and mercy. You have to see that as a whole, but when you separate it, that whole is missed. So that's just like that little thing. Because I know that with this song, that's something that kind of stuck with me when I was young, because I didn't get to understand it because of how disjointed it appeared on the screen.
I don't think that really has anything to do with the way it was put on the screen as much as how the song is sung. Yeah. Because there's like if you're really thinking about it,
there's a break.
There is a break right there, which.
But if you play,
I don't know why there's a break there.
If you place them together, though, then even with the break, you can kind of see where it's going. Yeah,
and I don't know, it's artistic style.
Yes.
And don't get me wrong, John Mark McMillan does a great job with his songs. And I don't know why, I don't want to critique the song so hard, but it does have its kind of, it's lyrical and musical flaws. But I'd say the message and the theme of the song stay pretty solid and stay strong. But it is some kind of, and not that any of these things make a song controversial. And the only real controversial thing is just this one line.
Yeah.
And whether it should be, and honestly, the one line, the last verse, and because it's just all the way taken out. But I do agree with what you're saying. The way it's been presented and the way it's been saying, even in the original version, is that one standalone line is kind of like, I am a tree. And then there's like a pause before and after. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess just his artistic style.
It is, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's just, when you see it as a whole, it makes sense. But when you see it broken up, it can get confusing. At least for me, it was.
Right.
But that's kind of like the first, that was like a minor thing. The second thing, which this is actually, I think, going to really connect us with the book of the Bible that we'll be looking at. But I want to talk about this idea of change and of people being resistant to change. Because I think, if we look at people as a whole, people don't like the change. They like things to remain the same. And the reason why I bring that up is because the lyric was changed, because they were like, I don't think people will be comfortable with this. Essentially this fear of let's change it so that they don't have to change their thoughts on what can be in a song and what can't be in a song, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And it's, like I said, again, it's kind of funny because you're afraid of this lyric, but then you get a Christian artist, let's see, that song probably came out in 2012, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get a Christian artist like King's Kaleidoscope about 5-6 years later.
Yeah.
Well, 6 years later, 2018, and they're putting out an album and they're dropping an F-bomb in it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like, at what point, all right, do we really start worrying about how much these words are going to affect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, do we worry about the minor stuff and let the major stuff slide, or do we worry about the major stuff and let the minor stuff slide?
Exactly.
You kind of got to pick your poison there, I guess, if there really is a poison, and just go with it. But Yeah, I mean, the change is, I guess there is a fear of that. And not only with the song, but with people in general. Um, you're right, people don't like change. And I think it's hard to see that people have changed. And one, when you're not around them. Two, it's hard to see people change when you don't want them to change. And you want the perception of them in your mind to stay the same. And so you refuse to see whatever change is going on in their life.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the hardest things, because we really should be praying for ourselves to see what God is doing, not only in our own lives and how he's changing us, but how he's changing and working in other people's lives as well, right? Like, I posted a meme. I didn't post a meme. I shared a meme. And
Is it the one I'm thinking of? I think I saw it.
yeah, it was like the first year of sanctification. It was on Instagram.
Oh, that was hilarious.
And it had this dude stepping on a rake. And then it was like 10 years of sanctification. And he's doing like a kickflip on a rake off like a 5-stair. And the rake still hits him in the face. And so it's kind of like that. And, you know, sanctification and change. And, you know, people are going to go through a whole lot. And they're going to change a whole lot when it comes to growing closer to God, when it comes to reading the Bible daily, when it comes to praying and seeking and pursuing God. And some people are just never going to want to see that. And we have to be, as your own person. So you as your own person, me as my own person. I have to recognize change in my own life. You have to recognize change in your own life. And we have to recognize how God is changing those around us as well.
That's very true. And I think, and that's where we kind of get to this connection for what we're looking at today in terms of our biblical study. But I think one person, you know, that would understand change more than a lot of people would be Paul. You know, the Apostle Paul, he had a huge change in his life. You know, he went from literally, you know, wanting Christians to be murdered to becoming a Christian. You know, and I think that's what brings us to our person of the day, Onesimus. You know, because Onesimus, he changed.
Right. And because of that change, Paul urged the believers to take him back. He was a slave who ran away. We never get the reason why, but he ran away. And then Paul, somehow he ends up finding Paul. We don't know.
I don't know.
We get like literally no details about Onesimus. We get no details about Philemon, who the letter is written to. And so the whole situation is kind of vague. And all we know is that this dude, Onesimus, he ran away and he was a slave. And he somehow finds Paul. And Paul takes him under his wing, shares the gospel with him, and he's saved. And then Paul sends him back to Philemon. And so, and he tells Philemon and all those others, he says, hey, take this guy back and treat him as one of your own. And that's about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's short. It's like 20 some verses, I think.
Right.
And that's it. You know, but that's such a, I guess, powerful letter, I think. You know, when we think about what happened. You know, because I feel like if I was in Philemon's shoes, would I want to accept my slave that ran away and have him come back and not punish him or charge him for any, you know, things that he did to me?
Right. And it kind of makes you wonder, you know, the reason as to why Onesimus ran away. And I guess if we're looking at kind of context, I would assume that he would have ran away because of something that he did. Right. Maybe it was something like more than likely against Philemon. And so he separates himself by running away and somehow comes up to Paul. And, you know, through that, whether Onesimus was just a bad slave, whether he stole something, whatever it was, we see that, and from the testimony of Paul, that he does attain salvation.
Yeah.
And, well, not that he attains it, he's given salvation. He is given that redemption from God, right? So, and then he's sent back. And Paul urges them to take him back. And I think that's the whole thing, right? There has to be this willingness, there has to be this willingness on the other party to take back the one who's done wrong and to live in that unity and harmony and love again, just as we're called to do. And it's honestly a command. Well, Paul urges. He doesn't, in that sense, Paul is urging. He's not commanding anybody to take Onesimus back.
He actually even writes that. He's like, look, if I wanted to command you, I could command you, but I don't want to command you. I want to urge you and encourage you.
Right. It should be of our own free will.
Yeah.
It should be of our own understanding that God takes us back. Well, I say takes us back, but God continually receives us, and he continually gives us grace and mercy and love and justice and righteousness, despite all the sin and wrongdoing we do against him. And just as he does that to us, we should be willing to do to others. And so I think that's the whole point of this. And we should be willing to see the change in others.
And by the way, a lot of that context is actually found within the letter.
Right.
Because first off, we understand that Philemon is a devout Christian. Just the way that Paul writes to him, he's definitely devout. But also Paul says anything that he did, charge it to me.
Right.
So that really adds to this, I don't even want to call it a theory, but because it makes more sense than it just being like speculation. But Onesimus must have done something to Philemon, if you just read within that context.
Right. And that's a good point you bring up, because they would have looked to Paul as somebody that was trustworthy. And it's kind of like that Christ-like example where Christ takes on the sin and the punishment for the person who actually did it. And so Paul is basically saying, hey, if you want to blame somebody, and whether that's for him going back, Paul's like, look, just blame me, right? Don't look at him, look at me, blame me, put it on my tab. And he goes through in that moment, Paul's probably thinking like, I've got such a long list. I've got such a laundry basket. I've got so many skeletons in my closet. What's one more gonna hurt? And he's probably also thinking at that same time, he's in prison. So I think that's kind of the first thing we have to establish. And so that's kind of the things running through his mind. He's in prison, and he's in there really for no reason except sharing the gospel. And the Romans just don't like it. The Jews really don't like it, so they imprison him. And so he's just like, man, I got this whole laundry list of infractions against me that aren't even true, that some of them are, like he did murder people. Yeah. But he, like I said, I can see him being, what's one more? So just go ahead and put it on me anyway, and not on Onesimus, this slave, and just receive him as another brother.
Yeah, and he takes it very seriously too, because you have to understand, at this point in Paul's life, a lot of his letters are dictated. Paul's not actually writing these out physically for the most part. But at that point, he very pointedly says, I am writing this with my own hand. So he took the time to physically go down and write it himself instead of dictating it, which a lot of his later letters were dictated.
Right, and that's one of the things when I was reading it, because you kind of get this side note by whoever is writing at first. They're like, I'm as Paul the aged. Yeah. And then 7 verses later, it's like, I, Paul. And so I had to write down, I was like, okay, who is writing this? And it is attributed to Paul, because like you said, he's dictating it and somebody is writing. And we go back to Paul's thorn in his side. Many people believe that was probably bad eyesight or something, but I don't know, not really important. But it's just kind of the controversy around, if we're talking about any type of controversy this episode, it's really, who wrote this book, and if it's even supposed to be in the Bible, and also about slavery in general, because people will use Philemon to promote slavery. And so those are kind of the 3 big things. But, we see Paul attest to writing at least half of the letter himself. And then in no way does Paul condone slavery. He understands that Onesimus is a slave, but we also understand the terms of a slave back then as somebody who was able to reconcile their freedom after a certain amount of time. And Onesimus probably ran away after doing something harmful and thus kind of forfeiting his freedom for a time. So he had to go back, and he went back as a slave to carry out the rest of his term. And that's kind of it. So no, the Bible, at least in Philemon, does not condone slavery. We have to get that right, because we do see it throughout history how that has been used, even today, to condone slavery and say that Christians do condone slavery and the Bible condones slavery. And it's not the slavery you're thinking of with American history in the 1700s, not that type of slavery where people were slaves for their entire life. They were born a slave and they died a slave. That's not what we're talking about. Even though some people were born into slavery back during those times, but they stayed a slave until they were the age where their freedom could be their own. And they worked for however long that was.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important point, because especially here in our context in America, when we think of slavery, we think of slavery in the context of American history, which that was a very bad form of slavery.
Right.
If I'm going to be honest, I think that back in that day, slavery made sense because, think about the jobs that slaves did. They did the housework, or whatever that entailed. If you take
in Paul's day.
Yeah, I'm talking about in Paul's day, yeah. But I'm thinking about would somebody willingly choose that job? I feel like most people willingly wouldn't want to do a job like that. So, it's almost think about it like you're signing a contract for a job for so much time. Because most of the time, those slaves were eventually set free. It wasn't it was more of an indentured servitude. Yeah. It wasn't like what we see in American history, where they were born a slave, stuck a slave. If they ran away, they were killed and stuff like that. Or
right.
that they had no rights. Because if you look in Paul's time, a lot of those slaves were seen as part of the family.
Right. They had rights.
They were very, very close with the family.
And, something to mention about when it comes to a slave being part of the family. Remember Abraham and Ishmael's mother. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. But she was a slave, technically, to Abraham.
Yes.
And yet, look at how Ishmael is treated by God, right? He is given a blessing. Just like Isaac, who is the true son to Abraham, was given a blessing. Ishmael was also given a blessing. And so we have to remember that the biblical definition of slave can be translated that way. And in the New Testament and Old Testament, it can also be translated as a servant. Yeah. Because that's more of what they were. They were there to serve the family, but they were also, like you said, part of the family. And that's something very important to remember.
Yeah, and I think that's the context that we should remember, because, and again, I don't, the Bible definitely doesn't promote slavery, I don't think at all, but at the same time, it's not out there saying it's a sin, to have a slave, if that makes sense.
Right.
There's not a commandment that says you shall not have a slave. You see what I mean? But I think it's been skewed in this modern age in how we view slavery. And I think the slavery that we view today and the slavery that we see today is very different from the slavery that we see in the Bible and the slavery that the Bible talks about.
Right.
Because I think slavery that we see today is very sinful, just in its nature. Yeah.
The one we've been accustomed to growing up with in American schools and learning about. Yeah. Very sinful. And, one other thing I want to say when it comes to slavery is that I also hate the agenda that gets pushed that only Africans, and I've seen this so much, is that, the African slavery, yes, it was atrocious, horrible. People throughout all of history have been enslaved like that.
Yes.
And so we don't relegate slavery to one group of people and say, okay, look at how bad this was compared to everybody else. And I think that's what, an agenda that gets pushed, that's also very sinful, right? Because we undermine the rest of history. And we undermine how other people went through it and undermine the history of other people when we just relegate our focus onto one group. Yeah, it was horrible. Don't get me wrong, right? But we just cannot sit here and say that one form of slavery at one point in history was any worse than any other type of slavery. That's wrong. That's all I'm going to say on that.
No, absolutely. Again, I think, like I said, this was going to be a short episode. I don't know. Do we have anything else to talk about when it comes to the Book of Philemon?
No, not really. I think we kind of hit everything.
It's definitely profitable, I would argue, to study. All Scripture is. We understand 2 Timothy. I forget. My brain is not working today. I'm in brain fog.
All Scripture is profitable for reproof. I can't remember the rest.
I was trying to think of the reference, and I couldn't think of the reference.
I don't know if it's in Timothy or not, but
I believe it's in 2 Timothy near the end. I believe chapter 4 is where it is. It might be chapter 3. But my brain is not there. But obviously, there's a lot of good things to learn from studying the letter of Philemon, and it's short, it's quick. I think the big, like, I don't know, do we call it a pun, or I guess wordplay? The name Onesimus means, doesn't it mean useless?
I think so. And he calls it, because Paul calls him useless in the verse.
He was like, he was useless.
Once useless, and
But
now
now
he's
he's useful.
Use.
Yeah. He's like he had like an ironic name. I guess that's the other.
Yeah, that's one thing when it comes to books of the Bible and people's names. Really go look up their names, because a lot of times, and their meanings, because a lot of times you're going to find that stuff that happens within the book, or certain things that are said from that person, or certain things said about that person, are wordplay on their name, or is something to that effect.
Yeah, and like especially when names are changed, but the scripture tells us, when when a name is given, it will oftentimes give us a reasoning for why they were named that. Right,
like you get Simon Peter or Cephas, going from a rock to boulder, basically, or a pebble to rock, my bad. Or you get Saul also being called Paul, and they mean the same thing. So it's perfectly acceptable if you want to call Paul Saul all the time.
Yeah, it's the same name.
It's literally the same name. One is just Hebrew, the other is Greek.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I want to say pick your poison again, but
I guess, yeah. But names are important. I think namely one of the biggest ones is why he was named Jesus, because Jesus means God saves.
Right.
That's why they called him Jesus.
Oh, yeah, and we went over this
weeks ago, I think.
No, weeks ago, bro. No, that was season 1.
Oh, it was a year ago now.
Yeah, it was a year ago. I think it was back in December when we were doing our Christmas series, and we're talking about the name of Jesus. So go listen to that episode and understand the name of Jesus.
Yeah. But I guess that's the end on that. Like I said, this is probably the shortest episode we've ever done, as expected.
Right. Yeah, and just to kind of wrap everything up, but how he loves, don't get caught up on the whole, is sloppy white kiss supposed to be in there? Or is it unforeseen kiss? It does not matter. Don't get hung up on that. And then, with Philemon, kind of talking about change, but people change all the time, especially when God is working on them. So acknowledge that, recognize it, and be gracious to accept those who have done something wrong, and then they've changed and repented of it, and accept them back with love.
Absolutely. How many times was my brother sinned against me and I forgive him?
Exactly. 1 trillion. Might as well be.
Yeah. So next week next week is heavy, because next week is an actual controversial song that people stop singing because of the controversy around it.
Yeah.
All because of one word.
I guess. I'm not going to give away the name of the song.
I'm not going to give it away. You guys will see it in the title, though, next week.
Oh, y'all thought.
Yeah, we almost did. But I think with that, I don't think there's anything else on my napkin.
No.
Oh, we hit everything on my napkin. With that, I guess we'll see you guys next week.
Peace out.
Thank you for listening to the Upper Room Discourse. Join us next week for more discussions in the Upper Room.